Oh yeah. Hey, student position here. All right. With everything that we've got going on in the world right now, there's a few principles here. Sorry, make sure you get the board in an okay spot. That there's something I need to talk about, and it comes from a couple people. One, Jordan Peterson. You don't know who Jordan Peterson is. You probably don't know who Jordan Peterson is. And another one's is a guy named Hiram Smith. They're both guys that teach personal development, teach about how to live our lives. And I kind of want to tie two of their principles together here to address stuff that we've got going on in the world and how we can make our lives better with what we're dealing with. So, first off, Jordan Peterson has, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember exactly what it is, in his 12 Rules for Life book, he talks about um, to never say yes when no is required. And Hiram Smith, he talks about um, governing principles. Sorry. Sorry if it's a little sloppy, but that's what we're going to work with. All right, so the way these two tie together, um, with Jordan Peterson, when he talks about never saying a no or saying yes when a no is required, he gives an example like in a work environment where maybe you have a new manager come in and they implement a rule that isn't necessary, but it kind of encroaches on your rights, but you don't say anything. If you don't say anything, it's just going to escalate. They're going to add another rule. And eventually, what happens, whether it's really quick, if it's a terrible manager, or if it's just one of those things that gets caught up into the policies over time, that you end up with these rules that um, are not good for the people that are working there or for the people um, that have to abide by the rules. And he talks about this is what happened in Germany and Russia, and I'm sure it happened in China too, where these tyrannical governments came in and they implemented more and more rules, more and more laws, and then you ended up with everyday Russian police killing people and torturing people, and you end up with people going along with genocide of the Jews, right? So they had these ideas and they stepped towards them. They were not right, but people didn't say no early enough, and by the time they said no, it was too late. Or that's not what I should say. By the time it became really clear that they needed to say no, they were too weak because they'd been saying yes too much. They had already gone too far down the path saying yes, and so it became time to say no, and they couldn't at that point because they didn't say no way back here when they needed to. So keep this thought in mind. Hiram Smith talks about governing principles. He also talks about that we have, if we break down human needs, that you can get four human needs: is to live, love, and be loved. This might be a little excessive for today's talk, but that's okay. We'll go into it more another day. Um, feel important. And variety. So we live our lives and we're trying to fill these human needs. And we have governing principles, which are principles that dictate the choices that we're going to make. And we want our governing principles to fill these needs. And when our governing principles fill the needs, then we feel good, we feel complete in that area. And so if it doesn't, if a governing principle about choices that we're going to make don't fill one of these needs, then we have, Hiram talks about it as a gap in our peace and being able to live our lives, because what we're doing isn't in harmony with our needs. Or if we're doing something in line with our principles that isn't in line with our needs, we have a gap there as well. So these two come together because if we, let me find my right words for this. If we don't have the right governing principles in place, then we won't know when we need to say no or what we need to say no to. I didn't realize this when I was growing up, but my parents tried to teach me this when I was a teenager. They talked to me about, hey, when you're hanging out with your friends, you need to be the friend that says to your friends, no, we shouldn't go see that movie, or maybe we need to leave the movie because it's a movie that we shouldn't be watching, right? Or you're at a party and your friends are doing something, or somebody offers you guys drugs or whatever the case may be, right? You need to be the friend that stands up and leads, not be a follower. Because if you're doing it, so say I've got governing principles on my board that, I've got values, like maybe I say I don't take drugs or alcohol because of how it's going to affect my body. But then I've got another principle that I'm loyal to my friends. And if my loyalty to my friends is above this principle that I'm not going to put drugs or alcohol in my body to take care of it, then my loyalty to my friends will win out. And so if my friends do drugs at a party, then I would end up doing drugs at a party, right? So that's the way those governing principles work. We have our highest and they go down from there. We'll get more into this on another day, but the idea, and we can see it coming around in the world today, that if we don't know what our governing principles are and what they should be, and if they're helping us meet our needs, then we're not going to know when is the time that we need to say no. And so we can end up in trouble because we end up too far down the path before we realize that this isn't in harmony with what you believe or what you think is right. So went a little longer than I wanted to, but I hope that makes sense. I'm actually putting a course together that's going to have guidelines on how we can get the right governing principles in our lives, and tie it in with Jordan Peterson's idea here about saying yes when you need to say yes and saying no when you need to say no, and how that actually keeps your governing principles in harmony with our basic needs, and that way it fills in the gaps in our life so that we don't have to live with that conflict inside of us.